Hi, it's Anne-Marie McElroan. Welcome back to Living from the Inside Out, Life in the Spiritual Lane. Today, we've got a special treat for you. Judy Johnson, the coordinator of the Halifax Brahma Kumaris Center, was recently in Brazil and had the good fortune to interview Ken O'Donnell. Ken has been in Brazil for more than 40 years. He's an organizational development consultant who's written several books in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And he acts as the volunteer coordinator for all of the Brahma Kumaris centers in South America. So let's tune in now and we can listen to Ken in conversation with Judy Johnson.
I'm with Ken right now in Brazil, actually, and exploring this topic of living from the inside out with Ken. So maybe you could start by just saying, what does it mean to you to live from the inside out?
In the same way that the anything that's interesting in history happened on the surface of the earth and not underneath the earth, we don't record the history of what happens below ground or below the sea, but we know that the planet is held together by forces which are in its in its whole state. We're not just a surface floating around. In the same way, our life happens at two levels. The surface level in which we're interacting with people and things, and an inner level where we're actually talking to ourselves about what goes on, basically. It's like Plato used to said that thinking was the soul talking to itself. So what do we talk about to ourselves? We talk about what's going on outside. We very rarely talk about what's going on inside because we can't really recognize where it comes from or why things are the way they are. So it's much easier to work with the outside world than the inside world because we can see it, we can touch it, we can hear it, we can feel it. But on the other side, we don't understand it. So we have to work out the understanding, and that's what happens on the inner level. We have to working out the way we understand ourselves and the world we're in by trying to talk to ourselves about what we realize, what we understand, what we see, and probably we don't have enough information to have a good call on what goes on.
So what's the key to living from the inside then? That's a lovely invitation to step inside, to make greater meaning, but what's the key for that being an effective experience?
Well, yeah, I think everything that happens has some reason. So there's a time and a place for everything and a reason. And the reason is unclear. It's not just atoms smashing against each other and whizzing around in the atmosphere. It's like there are things that explain why we are where we are, how we are, when we are, and who we're with, why we're with them, and so on. And that comes from an unknown past. And so if I stop and I become calm, and I realize that there are actually two worlds happening at the same time, I can, by stopping and pausing and going within, I can sort of start to synchronize myself better. So it starts with a thought. Who am I here at this time? What am I here at this time and in this place? And so the here and the now, that's connected with place and time, but the why is connected with who I am and what I am. So that sort of instigation helps me to start an inner dialogue. And this is one of the things I appreciate from learning meditation with Brahma Kumaris, because it's all about, it's not repeating mantras and, learning a particular technique. It's actually learning how to talk to yourself properly and more really, with more reality about those three things. Who am I? What's going on and why?
Could you guide us a little bit more on this why? So everything's happening for a reason and there's a story there. Guide us a little bit on how we do that for ourselves and make sense of things that are not seen.
Now, most people will look at time, for example, that I don't know, I started at some point in the past. I don't know what happened before then. And at some point in the future, this conscious life's going to stop. So I become, I'm very locked into a time interval. When I was born, when I die, that's it. The majority have that sort of limit on their perception of time. But it's not just about time, it's about places. How many places have I been in this life until now? If I did a graph of all of my movements, even over the last 6 months, it would look like crazy, it's chaos. So if I look at my whole life, in fact, Google can help you there. If sometimes I get, this is your timeline with Google, because they track you. And I didn't ever ask them to do that, but they show you where you went, how you went. Like last month I was in New York, and I went to, actually I was in New Jersey, then New York, and then I went to Chicago. We visited Indianapolis. When I was in New Jersey, we visited Philadelphia. And so I saw this, going all over the place. So there's the time dimension, and there's the space dimension, and that's a lot of coordinates if you look at it. But there's also the dimension of consciousness. And so it's actually I think myself into places, and I bring about situations by what I think, what I believe, what I say, what I decide. So that's actually moving me around these coordinates. So there are three things going on. It's the place and the time, and also the consciousness. The why is that. It's like I have made certain decisions and I've had certain thoughts over time, and they've led me to this and to that. If anyone who's listening, just ask yourself, why are you where you are? Who decided to get married? Who decided to study a particular subject? Who decided to take up a job? Who decided to travel? Was it someone else that jumped into your head and made you decide those things? No, you did it. So in the same way I did it. Now the thing is that most of the time we're being moved by what we've decided and thought about and said in the past. They've set up the conditions for something present, like even what's happening today. You decided to come to Brazil. You decided to come and interview me. It's like there are things that you decide and things that I decide, and I said I decide also, yes, I'll do it. So there is a certain responsibility in the reasons why things happen. But people don't often say that. And if you sit back really and ask yourself, there are several strands to any situation, but anything that happens, you are 100% responsible for what happens to you, and zero responsible, if you suffer, if you are happy, it's not because that someone else jumped inside your head and made you think, but you are appreciating or not appreciating things. And so if you start to have that sort of level of self-understanding, it really helps you to grapple with things that are going on. Because if I think I'm 100% responsible for my inner state, And I'm partly responsible for the external state because there are other actors and other people producing things. I don't produce Sao Paulo, for example, but I'm part of that production, right? There are others, 20 million people maybe, that are helping produce it. So we suffer the effects of other people's productions, but we also have our part in that too. So let me be responsible for my part, and let me get along with others while they settle with their parts.
So let's say I'm in a situation where things aren't going very well and I'm not feeling very good about my current situation. And I have this awareness that, wow, I mean, I made all the choices that led to this moment, but this moment and this period is not very good for me. Then what?
I think you can't change the past, even until the last second. You can't change whatever has already happened. But you can change two things. You can change the way that impacts on you in the present, and you can change the way forward because you still have some control over your next steps and next words, for example. So don't become desperate. You have partial control. At least control the things that you can control. And don't try to control things that you can't control. Don't try it. It's a waste of time. So what can I control? I control my thinking, for example. I can look at the situation and I can see, yes, all of these strands have come together to produce this situation. But if I'm taking suffering out of that situation, it's my thing. Let's say there are another 10 people in the same situation, none of them are suffering. It's like when someone's got the flu and it passes on to one person, but not to another 10 who have been living, engaged with that person for the same length of time. So I can see, I have to be responsible for my part. Let's say the person unconsciously has done something terrible and they're not even aware of it, but I've taken so much suffering out of that because it's my reading, it's my interpretation. A mix of my own paranoia, that person's out to get me. Why did that person say that to me? I have never seen that person say that to anyone else. Why only to me? And then you start another level. No one loves me, no one cares, no one buys me chocolates anymore. And so that's your own creation. So you have the event.
Right.
And then you have what you produce in your own head about that event.
Right.
And they may not be the same thing, you know.
Or one certainly amplifies the other if I let it.
Let's say there's an accident, right? Someone dies. Now, the policeman who comes along, for him, it's just another accident. It's another idiot who decided to bash into a tree, right? That's what the policeman's thinking. Then he calls a doctor to come and look. You know, I've got a stiff here. I've got a dead body here. Can you come and have a look and just check? We have to make it, proper. So the doctor comes. Yeah, it's a dead body. And then they find out it's the son of the local widow who's, she's the only son. They check his documents, and they call her to come. How does she see? She doesn't see a dead body. She doesn't see an idiot who's decided to bash into a tree. It's her loving son, right? And then you've got a tow truck driver who comes along, and he's got 10 kids, he wants to make money, he's got to survive, so he's happy that there's been an accident, right? At least he's able to feed his kids for the next 2 weeks. So you see, who of all of those people have the correct vision of the situation? Each of them has their own little part. So any situation that you're in, you'll have a policeman, a doctor, a mother, the victim, a tow truck driver, and they all have their own sense of reality. I have to train myself to respect my part, but I have to see the whole thing as well and understand that people will and always will have different perspectives because they've had a different past. They'll have a different future.
Wow, that's really helpful. So let's say I want to create a different view. My reality is the widow who's lost the son, and I'm feeling it in a very personal and suffering way. How do I work with that internally? I'm not going to change my reality. That is my son who's now gone. There will be sadness. There will be everything. What do I do?
Okay, there are, as I said in the beginning, there are two realities happening at the same time. There's the external reality of things that happen, but there's the spiritual reality. So let's look at it from the spiritual reality's perspective. I am a soul. I am a soul giving life to this body and to my activities through this body. And the soul who was living the part of my son is a soul also, who was until recently giving life to that particular body, and now he's moved on. But he did not stop to exist, just as I don't stop to exist. So how do I look at that son as from a spiritual perspective? Yes, my loving son, and we were close and so on, but now that soul has moved on to somewhere else. If you have the perspective of rebirth, for example, which really helps, there's a long-term story for everyone. Each life is like the chapter of a book. But what's the next chapter? How can I help that soul in the next chapter? If I really love that soul, how can I help that soul in the next chapter of their life? Won't help them grieving. Actually, if I interviewed that soul now, if I could, son, does my grieving help you in your new part? And he will say, no, it's really holding me back. I really love you, Mum, but now I'm in a different situation. Just send me light. I'll be happy if you can do that. So if you really love me, just send me light. Don't send me grief. It's a bit hard to swallow that pill, but as I said, there are two ways to look at life: the long-term spiritual view or the short-term story view.
Yeah, current events.
Current events.
I feel like what you brought to us is a much deeper exploration than most of us are living at the surface level. And even as we try to go deeper, we may go into thoughts or we may go into feelings, and we may know that, say, grieving or healing from trauma, all of these are very important things to do. And yet I feel what you're bringing is let's look even deeper than even that level at the reality that exists of the eternal being. Now, what helps us bring ourselves to that level? Because it isn't, yes, I can explore that it's there and even be open to the possibility that it exists, which is wonderful. But what helps me move through all of the inevitable emotions and feelings and traps to that deeper view? What has helped you move to that deeper view and really land there and keep that view as your primary reality?
People think that detachment means to be cold and just
indifferent
and show your back to something as you move away. But actually it means to move to another level of perception where you see more. Mm. And by seeing more, you'll understand more. You'll understand that situation's within another situation, which is within another situation, which is within another situation, and you start to move out from the photograph of the situation to a whole cosmological context, where it's souls moving through a vast period of time which actually has no beginning and no end. And at that level, there's also God. And God can see the whole picture. And why doesn't God ever get upset? We're supposed to be his children, right? And so his children are leaving bodies, and that's what we would call death. All the time, and they're taking birth all the time. Which is better, to leave a body or to take birth? Actually, they're part of the same whole story of life. So detachment means to go to a situation where you can see the whole thing in a bigger context and just feel love. So we don't need to learn to become detached. We just need to learn to love in a more unlimited way. And that brings me closer to God. Because if I start to see and feel the way God sees and feels, I will be much more helpful for anyone else than someone who's just pining away because something I didn't want to happen happened.
I hope you all enjoyed that amazing rainforest bird that was chirping along with us. I'll be back for the next podcast with Ken for a second part to this conversation. Join us then. Thank you.